The Colonial Parkway is a 23-mile stretch of scenic highway that cuts a ribbon through the historic triangle of Virginia, connecting Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. It is a road designed for leisure, a place where the asphalt curves gently beneath a canopy of ancient trees and the York River laps quietly against the shore. It is meant to be a journey through the birth of a nation, a place of beauty and reflection. But for those who remember the late 1980s, this scenic byway is not a monument to history, but a graveyard of secrets. It is a place where the mist clinging to the asphalt hides the echoes of a terror that gripped the breathless nights of Virginia for 3 long years. Welcome to DCF Investigations. Tonight, we are turning our headlights onto the dark, winding pavement of the Colonial Parkway, peeling back the layers of a mystery that has haunted law enforcement and terrified a community for nearly 4 decades. This is the complete, exhaustive story of the Colonial Parkway Murders. To truly understand the horror of these crimes, one must first understand the atmosphere of the time and the place. The Colonial Parkway is unique. It falls under federal jurisdiction, patrolled by the National Park Service, yet it weaves through local counties and state lands. It is a jurisdiction nightmare, a patch of land where authority blurs. In the 1980s, it was a popular spot for young couples. Lovers' lanes dotted the pull-offs, places where privacy was sought under the cover of darkness. It was an era before cell phones, before constant surveillance, a time when being out of touch meant simply being unreachable. It was in this veil of isolation that a predator, or perhaps predators, found their hunting ground. The nightmare began on Columbus Day weekend in 1986. The air was turning crisp, the leaves beginning to turn, drawing tourists to the historic sites. Among the visitors were 27-year-old Cathleen Thomas and 21-year-old Rebecca Dowski. Cathleen was a trailblazer, a United States Naval Academy graduate, part of the second class of women to ever graduate from the institution. She had left the military and was working as a stockbroker. Rebecca was a senior at the College of William and Mary, a bright young woman with a future full of promise. They were in a relationship that, due to the societal and military pressures of the time, required discretion. The Parkway offered them a quiet place to be together. On the evening of October 12th, they were seen leaving a computer lab at the college. They were never seen alive again. Their white 1980 Honda Civic was discovered pushed down an embankment near the York River. To a passing motorist, it might have looked like a simple accident, a car that had rolled too far. But when authorities arrived, the scene they found was not one of accidental tragedy, but of calculated brutality. The car was concealed by brush, almost invisible from the road. Inside, the scene was gruesome. Both women were dead. They had been strangled with rope, the ligatures pulled so tight that the killer had used a distinct, complex knotting technique. But the killer had not stopped at strangulation. Their throats had been slashed, extending from ear to ear. The violence was excessive, visceral, suggesting a deep-seated rage. There was no evidence of sexual assault, and their purses and money were left untouched. This was not a robbery. This was an execution. Interestingly, there were signs of a struggle, but also signs of compliance. The car window was rolled down. In the 1980s, people did not simply roll down their windows for strangers in the dark unless that stranger held authority. This detail would become the cornerstone of one of the most enduring theories of the case: that the killer was posing as a police officer or a park ranger. The investigation into the deaths of Thomas and Dowski was complicated from the start. Because the bodies were found on federal land, the FBI took the lead. But the interplay between federal agents and local Virginia authorities was often fraught with friction. The forensic analysis of the car revealed something peculiar. Diesel fuel was found on the body and the car's interior. It was a strange, industrial element introduced to a crime of passion. Was it an attempt to destroy DNA evidence in an era before DNA profiling was common? Or was it a signature? For months, the community was on edge. But as time passed without an arrest, the fear began to subside. Life returned to normal. But the darkness on the parkway was not finished. Almost a year later, in September of 1987, the silence was shattered again. This time, the location was slightly off the parkway, at the Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge, a desolate area just across the James River Bridge. The victims were 20-year-old David Knobling and 14-year-old Robin Edwards. David had taken his pickup truck out that evening, and Robin, defying her parents' curfew, had met him. Days later, David's truck was found by his father, who had been searching frantically. The truck was parked at the refuge. The driver's side window was halfway down. The radio was still playing, and the windshield wipers were on, battling a battery that had long since drained. It was a scene of interruption. The keys were still in the ignition. It looked as though the driver had stepped out for a moment and vanished. Their bodies were found washed ashore along the riverbank nearby. Unlike the first pair, they had not been strangled. They had been shot. Robin had been shot in the back of the head, execution style. David had been shot in the shoulder and the head. It appeared he had tried to run, to escape the doom that had befallen them. The change in modus operandi, from strangulation and knives to firearms, threw investigators for a loop. Was this the same killer? The locations were geographically linked to the water and the Lover's Lane dynamic. But the method of death was different. Yet, the psychological signature remained similar. A couple isolated in a vehicle, approached, overpowered, and executed without robbery or sexual assault being the primary, obvious motive. The police were now dealing with what looked like a serial killer, but the inconsistencies were maddening. The profile of the killer was shifting. Was he evolving? Or were there two predators operating in the same small radius? The terror escalated in April of 1988. Cassandra Haley and Keith Call, both college students, went on their first date. They attended a party in Newport News and left together in Keith's red Toyota Celica. They were never seen again. The next day, Keith's car was found at the York River overlook on the Colonial Parkway, just a few miles from where Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski had been murdered 2 years prior. The car was abandoned. The driver's side door was open. The keys were on the seat. But it was what was found inside the car that chilled investigators to the bone. Keith's wallet was there. Cassandra's purse was there. And in the back seat, nearly all of their clothing was found. This discovery led to immediate and disturbing speculation. Had they gone skinny dipping? The water was freezing in April. Had they been forced to undress? The absence of bodies turned this into a missing persons case. But the context screamed murder. Search dogs tracked their scents to the water's edge, but the trail vanished there. Drag marks were notably absent, suggesting they were marched to the water or transported. The river was dredged, the woods were combed, but Cassandra and Keith had simply evaporated. The psychological toll on the community was now immense. Parents forbade their children from driving the parkway. The road, once a symbol of freedom, became a corridor of fear. The theories regarding a rogue cop gained immense traction. Who else could approach a car on a dark road, order the occupants out, or force them to undress without a struggle? The open door and the orderly placement of items suggested a command presence. Then, in September of 1989, the fourth tragedy struck. This time, the connection to the parkway was more tenuous, but the grim result was the same. Anna Maria Phelps, 18, and Daniel Lauer, 21, vanished while driving from Amelia County to Virginia Beach. They were in a gold Chevrolet Nova. They were not a couple in a romantic sense. They were dating each other's siblings and were traveling together for a move. When they failed to arrive, a massive search began. Their car was found abandoned at a rest stop in New Kent County, near the interchange of Interstate 64, not far from the parkway. The car was parked oddly, facing the wrong direction for the on-ramp, as if they had been intercepted or forced to pull over. A blanket was hung in the window, a sign often used by motorists to signal distress or a breakdown. But the car had no mechanical issues. Inside the car, investigators found Anna Maria's purse. But even more baffling was the discovery of roach clips, small devices used for smoking marijuana, which led to immediate speculation about a drug deal gone wrong. However, their families vehemently denied any involvement in drug trafficking. It wasn't until weeks later that hunters stumbled upon their remains on a logging road deep in the woods, about a mile from where the car was found. The bodies were in an advanced state of decomposition, making the determination of the cause of death extremely difficult. However, stab marks were identified on Anna Maria's bones. The location was remote, a place only a local would know. The bodies were covered with a blanket from the car, a gesture that some criminal profilers suggest indicates remorse or a personal connection, although it can simply be a method of concealment. With 4 double homicides or disappearances in 3 years, the FBI and the Virginia State Police formed a task force. But the investigation was plagued by the lack of physical evidence and the degradation of crime scenes. The killer, or killers, left almost nothing behind. No fingerprints, no shell casings in some instances, no witnesses. Over the years, the suspect list grew and shrank. There were local fishermen who were interrogated. There were rumors of a satanic cult, a popular panic in the 80s, though little evidence supported it. One of the most compelling and controversial figures to emerge in the investigation was a former deputy sheriff named Fred Atwell. Atwell had inserted himself into the investigation, contacting the families, offering theories, and claiming to know where evidence was hidden. He was a polarizing figure. To some, he was a dedicated lawman frustrated by the bureaucracy. To others, he was a suspect hiding in plain sight. He had a history of legal troubles and a personality that craved the spotlight. He eventually went to prison for unrelated crimes, and while he remained a person of interest in the public eye, authorities never formally charged him with the murders. He died in 2018, taking whatever secrets he held to the grave. The case suffered a massive blow in 1996 when graphic crime scene photographs of Thomas and Dowski were leaked to the public. These images were used in a training seminar for law enforcement, but ended up in the hands of a journalist. The leak devastated the families and compromised the integrity of the investigation, leading to a breakdown in trust between the victims' loved ones and the authorities. For decades, the Colonial Parkway murders remained cold. The files gathered dust, and the families grew older, their hope for justice dimming with each passing year. The theories continued to swirl. Was it a serial killer? Was it two different killers operating in the same area? Was it a coincidence of geography? The discrepancies in the modus operandi, strangulation, shooting, stabbing, disappearance, fueled the debate that perhaps these cases were not linked by a single perpetrator, but by the location itself. However, the relentless march of technology began to catch up with the past. As DNA science evolved from basic blood typing to mitochondrial DNA and finally to advanced genealogical profiling, investigators quietly went back to the evidence preserved from 1986. And then, a seismic shift occurred. In January of 2024, the Virginia State Police and the FBI made a stunning announcement that rewrote the history of this case. Using advanced genomic sequencing, they positively identified a man named Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. as the killer of David Knobling and Robin Edwards, the couple found at Ragged Island. Furthermore, they linked him to the murder of Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski, the first victims on the Parkway. Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. was a local fisherman and a small business owner who ran a tree service. He lived in the area during the time of the murders. He was known to drive a pickup truck, fitting the description of a vehicle seen near the crime scenes. He was described by those who knew him as having a temper, a man who felt entitled to the space around him. He hunted and fished in the very areas where the bodies were found. Most chillingly, Wilmer had been on the radar of law enforcement. He was questioned once, but was never treated as a prime suspect. He continued to live his life in the community. He died in 2017, a free man, never facing a judge for the atrocities he committed. The confirmation of Wilmer as the killer for 2 of the 4 cases provided a massive piece of the puzzle. It connected the strangulations of Thomas and Dowski with the shootings of Knobling and Edwards, proving that the shift in modus operandi was indeed the work of a single, adaptable predator. It validated the fears that a serial killer had been hunting in the historic triangle. But this revelation brought a bittersweet, partial closure. While the families of the first 2 pairs of victims finally had a name, the families of Cassandra Haley, Keith Call, Anna Maria Phelps, and Daniel Lauer were left in a painful limbo. Authorities stated that while Wilmer is a suspect in the remaining cases, there is currently not enough forensic evidence to conclusively link him to them. The disappearance of Haley and Call, with the bodies never found, remains a particularly difficult knot to untie without physical remains to test for DNA. The question now hangs heavy over the Parkway. Did Wilmer commit all 4 double homicides? The geographical clustering and the target profile suggest it is highly likely. He knew the woods. He knew the water. He had the means and the opportunity. But until physical evidence bridges that gap, the final 2 cases remain officially unsolved. There is also the lingering question of the law enforcement impersonator theory. Did Wilmer use a ruse? Did he have a flashing light or a badge? Or was his approach simply one of overwhelming aggression that forced compliance? We may never know the specific words spoken in those final, terrifying moments, but we now know the face of the monster who spoke them. Today, the Colonial Parkway remains as beautiful as ever. The sun still dapples through the trees, and the York River still flows silently to the sea. But for the locals, and for the families of the victims, the road is forever changed. It is a memorial, a scar on the landscape of Virginia. The investigation is technically still open for the remaining cases. The FBI and Virginia State Police continue to ask for tips, hoping that someone who knew Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. might remember a trophy he kept, a comment he made, or a strange behavior he exhibited during those blood-soaked years. The story of the Colonial Parkway Murders is a testament to the endurance of grief and the relentless pursuit of truth. It took nearly 40 years, but science finally pierced the veil of time. Yet, the silence of the woods, where Anna Maria and Daniel were found, and the depths of the river that may hold Cassandra and Keith, still keep their secrets. This case reminds us that evil often wears a mundane face. It was not a drifter or a phantom. It was a fisherman, a neighbor, a man who walked among the community while carrying the weight of multiple murders. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of America's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. We at DCF Investigations are dedicated to keeping these stories alive, ensuring that the victims are never forgotten and that the quest for answers never ends. As we conclude, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. Given that Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. has been linked to the first 2 double homicides, do you believe he is responsible for all 4? Or is it possible that the Colonial Parkway was the hunting ground for more than one predator during those dark years? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay observant and stay safe.